So since you kind of put it on Main Street, I don't feel that it's unfair to ask for those. You said 5 novels before you had one that was submitted in plus a relationship with an agent that just didn't work out. But I'm sure you learned a tremendous amount from that experience. What kept you going all during that time?
Yeah, and absolutely. I don't mind talking about this at all. And I'm actually, anybody who follows me on Twitter, I talk a lot about how long my road was. And I talk a lot about having had to break up with an agent, because I think there's so much of this stuff we don't talk about. And we're all on this journey, and some people it's longer than others. But even if the first book you write sells, there are so many parts of the journey that are a struggle, and that it's really easy to feel alone and like you're the only one who's ever struggled with these things. So I think the more that we can talk about them, if you're comfortable, I think that helps other people feel like, oh, she didn't get her first novel published. She had to write 10. So that's why I'm very open about it. As for what kept me going, so the number one thing is my community. I have had wonderful critique partners from the very beginning. With my very, very first novel, I was listening to some of your episodes, and I saw that you had Jessica Lawson on. And Jessica, who's a middle grade author of, of upcoming, her 5th book is coming up. But The Actual and Truthful Adventures of Becky Thatcher was her first novel. And she and I became friends and critique partners like 10 years ago, way before either of us had gotten an agent.
So were you a critique partner on Becky Thatcher?
Yeah, I was. I was a critique partner on like her 3 novels before that. And then I was with her on Becky Thatcher. She got an agent first. She has read absolutely everything I've ever written. And she's my oldest critique partner, but she's not my only one. I have just this wonderful community. And so having that community is just huge, because, and not only for the critique, and which is valuable for sure, of your work, but also just for the emotional support, the people who are at a similar stage to where you're at, to be able to understand, commiserate with you when you get an agent rejection, or celebrate you when you get a pull request, or whatever it is. So that community is the number one thing. The other thing I would say is that I learned this as a playwright. I have always been very good about starting the next project as soon as the last one's out the door. So as soon as I start querying a book, I would be starting to write the next one. And that way, as the rejections start rolling in, I would be in that really exciting phase where you're just starting a new book and there's so much possibility. And I would always, without fail, end up much more excited about the thing I was working on. So that when rejections would come in, I'd go, it doesn't matter, because I don't want that one anyway. It's this new one that's going to be the one. So keeping focused on that next new thing. And that has remained true even now that I'm published. You still have things go on submission. You still get rejections. And so getting excited about the next thing I'm working on continues to be a thing that sort of propels me along.
So I have lots of follow-up questions for that.
Okay.
First, since you mentioned that you're giving out this advice for free on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle where everybody can go and follow you now?
It's JMC Writes, like Joy McCullough, JMC. And I'm on there more than I should be. Although recently I have used the Freedom app to limit myself, so I only have access during a couple of hours a day. So it's working well to cut down for me. But I'm still around, and I'm really, really open. If people are having agent struggles, like a lot of people DM me, and they're welcome to, or just questions about publishing or whatnot. I love to share the information I have, because it was so hard fought.
So when you were getting started and there was no Joy McCullough that you could direct message and ask directly, how did you find your critique partners, and how did you find your way?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's been about 10 years that I've been in this Kidlit community, and it has changed a lot, because when I was first starting, blogs were the big thing. So I met Jessica she had a blog, she still has it, called Falling Leaflets. And I happened to come across it and read about her and what she was working on. And she had 2 small kids, and she just seemed like someone I'd get along with, And so I just sent her an email saying, "Hi, I read your blog, just wanted to say hi." And she wrote back, and we just struck up a friendship. And I think that not approaching it in terms of, I got to find someone who's going to read my manuscript and give me feedback. Rather, approaching it in terms of, I want to build relationships with other people in this community, And so once we had built this relationship, then it was a natural thing for, I don't even remember who asked first, but one of us to say, "Hey, do you want to trade 50 pages and see how we, respond to each other's work?" And it grew from there. So blogs are one place. Absolute Right was a writing forum. It still is, but I don't know how active it is because message boards aren't as much a thing as they used to be, I think. But that was a place where I asked a lot of my questions, where there were some really wonderful established authors who were there, who would answer questions. And I think I found a couple critique partners there. There were a couple of blogs who would do like critique partner matchups, where you could say, "I'm writing a middle grade that's a fairy tale retelling," and blah, blah, blah. And somebody else could just see that and say, "Hey, that sounds like something I'd like to read." So it was sort of, there wasn't one place that I would find critique partners, but it was just sort of putting my feelers out into the community and finding the different avenues to get to know people and making it relationship first. And then from there, I have built just a really wonderful network of people who are critique partners, but really they're dear friends first.
Makes sense. And man, you couldn't have done better than Jessica Lawson. She's one of my most favorite people. I reached out to her. I think she reached out to me. I don't remember which. But we've been online friends just forever, which is why it was such a thrill when we were finally talking in person on the podcast, because we've been emailing for years. I'm just a huge fan of everything she's ever written. She's fantastic.
She's marvelous.
And so if you're Jessica Lawson certified, my esteem for you just doubled.
Excellent.
So how, I promised the esteemed audience before we're done, we are going to talk about a field guide to getting lost available now. But how did you go from playwriting to being able to fill in description, fill in all those character details, everything that intimidated you? Because as I read this, I couldn't help but notice it's not a script. it's a full story, very expertly written. So how did you go about learning the craft to transition from one type of writing to the new one?
Like I said, we were reading aloud so much with my daughter. And I think that's the advice I give to anyone who comes to me and says, we all hear it as writers. "Oh, I want to write a novel." So many people say that like they could just do it if they sat down and did it. But what I always recommend is you need to read, and you need to read voraciously, and you need to read within the category that you want to write. If you haven't read kids' books, since Roald Dahl, you have a little bit of catching up to do. So I had been reading so much middle grade aloud that it wasn't a matter of sitting down to study how description worked, but it kind of seeped into me because it was literally hours a day. There was a point when partly I was exhausted, and I was like, I almost couldn't believe how much we were reading, and I spent about a week tracking the minutes we would read and the hours. And this was, my daughter was like 4. It averaged 5 hours a day of reading aloud. She didn't do preschool. And so we would just sit and read all day. So that's how I figured it out, I think, is so much reading. And I think also reading it aloud gives you sort of a different layer on it than necessarily just reading it on the page. So it really just sort of became part of me. I didn't set out to learn the craft or read anything in particular about this is how you write a children's book. I read, and then I tried writing.
You managed to both when parenting and writing.
She's still a big reader too.
And